Well, thank you everyone for being here today, this 94th Fireside Chat. Adam is going to start us off. He'll start the introduction for us today.
Yes, thank you very much, Donna. As always, welcome everybody to the 94th Fireside Chat with Tom Campbell. I am your co-host, Adam Hashin, and with me, of course, is the always lovely Donna Aveni. And we, very surprisingly, are representing 4 continents in this chat right now. We have North America, South America, Europe, and Asia. So it's good morning, good afternoon, or good night to one of you. Really cool to see this community growing. I told Donna, gone are the days of the 5-person fireside chats. So everyone's question, we try and get everyone's question in. We got a nice list. If you haven't gotten your question on the site yet, post it in the chat. We'll make sure you get it. We'll get you on the list. As I like to always say, anybody who's still sitting on the sidelines, feel free to get engaged. We won't bite. You know, there's an awesome email list. That's a great way to get started. There's all kinds of ways to volunteer and put your expertise to service. We really appreciate it all. A simple example of that is my good friend who just won the MBT Person of the Year this year. She's here right now, Linda Sterling. She's an extremely talented editor or proofreader, and she actually proofread every page of Tom's book and then proof listened to the audiobooks as well. Volunteer service. So big ups to Linda. Anybody can help. It just shows anybody can do something and make a difference. So still on the sidelines, get in the game. We need your help. We're trying to get this message to the masses. And one more mention, I know there is a Spain MBT event coming up next year. We just had a big QSAC event in Alabama. Went absolutely great. I've heard nothing but positive things. But there is a Spain event coming up next year. Just want to mention that there may only be one spot left, but there is a waiting list. Life happens, people. There's cancellations all the time, so get on the waiting list if it's something you're interested in. Let's get right into the questions. We're going to Kiat and Caroline live from Kuala Lumpur with our first questions tonight or today. Go ahead, guys.
Thanks, Adam. So, the Nine Emperor Gods Festival is a 9-day Taoist celebration in Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand. This year, festival ended just last week on October 11. Some interesting rituals are firewalking, piercing and impaling knives, swords, pipes, and other objects through the cheeks, names, tongues, and bodies without anesthetic. And they are mediums channeling different deities. Okay, question 1. What is the MBT explanation on firewalking and mutilation without injury to the devotees? In a documentary, the mediums disclose they are forced into their roles. Some mediums, okay. A young male medium resisted participating by not observing the strict vegetarian diet. Consequently, he suffered from severe diarrhea and vomiting. A female medium reported immobility due to severe leg pain. Question 2. In MBT, free will is an integral part of consciousness. Are the free will of these reluctant mediums being overridden by other non-physical entities? Question 3. What advice would you give these mediums to free themselves from possession by unwelcome entities?
All right, first we'll do the firewalking and the mutilation without scars, maybe without damage. That's been going on for a very long time, and it is a real thing. I've seen videos of Westerners who've gone to India or someplace and after some preparation gotten in line and walked through the coals, about 100 feet of hot coals, So it's not something that it takes a lifetime to prepare yourself for, but this is a virtual reality. In virtual reality, almost anything is possible. You might even be able to just levitate and fly around. You know, in a virtual reality, everything is possible. Okay, so the firewalking is usually a demonstration. It's not that somebody just goes off by themselves in their backyard and decides to walk through fire. It's usually a demonstration in front of a lot of people. As a demonstration, it's supported by the larger conscious system because it opens minds up. The people who are there, who actually can see that that's real fire and it's actually hot and they are coals, you know, that could be faked if you're watching this remotely. But if you're there, it's obvious that that's what's going on. These people really are walking barefoot for the most part through hot coals. And they come out the other side and they're not burnt. Every once in a while, you'll have somebody get about halfway through and they go ouch and jump out and they are burnt. It's a matter of keeping your mind steady. It's a matter of having your focus on what you're doing, that you will get through it and you will not be burnt. And it's that the larger conscious system is supporting that because it helps. It's a good mind opener. It helps people see that reality isn't just as simple as the materialists would have us think. There's really strange things that can happen, and that these strange things really are happening. It's not just a bunch of people trying to pull fast one over on them. So that's why it's supported, and that's why it's done, and that's the reason it works. The system can let anything like that work if it likes, even you flying around if it wanted to do that. So that's why it works, and that's why it works for people who haven't been preparing themselves for a lifetime. Those who have, it's maybe a very simple process. They just have their minds on making the probability of burning very small and the probability of getting to the other end without burning much higher. Those people who aren't prepared and they do it anyway, I think the system just kind of floats them through the process, just because otherwise it would get a bad reputation of people getting halfway through and getting terribly burned, you know. So that's how those things happen. And mutilations, there was a guy that, since we're on the Fireside Chat, this was something that was at the Oliver site. Oliver's the German man who started this Fireside Chat. And there was I'm not sure what his nationality was, somewhere in Europe, maybe Eastern Europe, I'm not sure. And he would take a sword, a saber, and he'd run himself through with it, go all the way through him, come out the other side, pull the sword back out again, and he would be fine. So he did several things like that. And finally, after a long string of demonstrations where he ran himself through, he swallowed a dagger, and the dagger pierced something inside of him and killed him. So he wasn't able to get away with it all the time. I think probably his ego got a little big, and he was not in the right frame of mind. He wasn't approaching it with humility. He was approaching it with, look at me, I'm special. And that was not good. So it didn't kill him right away, but it over the next 2 weeks or something after he swallowed the dagger killed him. So you can go see the video of it. If you go to Oliver's site, I'm sure all that stuff is still out there. They preserved his site, and he did a lot of other things like that. I remember being very young and going to a carnival, they have these sideshows of strange things. And there was a man in there who took looked like knitting needles, And he was very disdainful of the idea of germs being a problem. So he'd put them in the dirt and he'd spit on them and he'd run his hands over them, let anybody handle them that wanted to. And then he'd take them and he'd stick it through this cheek and through his mouth and out through the other cheek, you know, things like that. And that was his living. That's what he did for a living. 4 times a day, he ran things, you know, I think he had 4 shows a day. And 4 times a day, he'd run 5 or 6 big knitting needles through his face and through his neck and other places. So again, that's just the system. So now the second question was people being forced by non-physical entities to do these things. I find that one a little hard to believe. I think it's more likely that their own fear and reticence are playing those parts. I've never found entities in the non-physical that would, you know, that would do that. Now, it doesn't mean they aren't there. I've just never run into them. I know the larger consciousness system wouldn't do it, and I know the rules in the larger consciousness system wouldn't abide by it. That would be against the rules. If they did that often, they'd be stopped if they were caught. So that's a little surprising, but I can imagine somebody who starts it, becomes fearful, tries to build up their courage, and basically forces themselves to go through with it because otherwise they'd look foolish in front of themselves and in front of the other people that they started this with, that they were backing out, that they were too fearful. So they forced themselves. And in that process of forcing themselves, I think they probably create this non-physical entity who makes them do it. And I think that non-physical entity who makes them do it is really themselves. So that would be my best guess, because I know such things are illegal and not supported in the non-physical. And how would they get over it? I suspect the best thing to do is just not be involved in it anymore. You know, just say no, I'm not gonna do those sorts of things anymore. I'm retired from doing paranormal demonstrations with my body, and just quit. And those entities aren't going to do anything with them. Now, they may feel guilty because they started out on a path and they quit it because they weren't quite able to quiet their minds and get it done, but that guilt will disappear after a while. Well, it won't disappear, but they'll deal with it perhaps after a while. They may for a while be bothered by that entity, but that will be their guilt talking. So that's my assessment of it. They weren't really forced. If they were, the big cheese was asleep at the switch and should have caught that and either stopped it or, you know, fixed it, because that kind of forcing against the free will is not acceptable by the rules.
Okay, thank you.
So now that we are already at the non-physical topic, I like the idea of a non-physical police, but how is it with vortexes? In your recent, like one of the recent videos, you've been talking about how how they have been kind of dropped on the earth to make it easier for people to experience paranormal stuff. And I've been visiting quite a lot after that. So, and I do confirm that it's really, the energy is really strong. And also here close by, we have Bali, where there's like a strong vortex as well. I'm just curious, how would that go if we wanted to create one? Would that be possible? Or is that something that the big cheese decides where that's going to be created? Or is that something that's just already set and it's not going to be changed? How are the rules about something like that?
Okay. Well, you know, the shall we say, the not just the metaphor, but the myth of that is that when you've heard of Indra's net, when the void finally produced something, there was nothing in the void but potential, and that potential came to a head and erupted, and then there was something there. She had this net that with jewels in it, and the mythology is that she slung these jewels out, and they landed on the earth at various places, and where each jewel landed, now that's a vortex. Okay, now I don't give that a whole lot of credit, but that's the mythology behind it. Do they exist? Yes, I've been to some of those places, and you can tell a very big difference in the energy. Can we create one? Yes, we can create one. You know about collective consciousness. If you have people living in a particular area, and there is a myth that there's something in that area, so it attracts people, and people come there, and they live there, and they go to that place, and they can feel this energy, and they whatever, and more people come, and more people come. Now, all the people who have come there and feel that energy, they start creating a collective consciousness about that energy, and they add to it. So now their collective consciousness is actually part of the effect. Now, when it's easy to have suggestions for people, an awful lot of what we experience has to do with what we think, how relaxed we are, our expectations. If we are told by various people that this is a sacred area, a very special area, and when you get there, you'll just immediately feel connected to the great beyond and so on, then the probability that will happen goes up because you anticipate it. You're open for it. When you get to that area, suddenly you quiet your mind because you want to feel this. You don't want to be jabbering about, some, useless thing. You want to be paying attention to how you feel. So you calm yourself. You get rid of your thoughts. Well, what you're doing is you're preparing yourself for that kind of a thing. So the probability that you'll find it then is much higher. Where you could, if you weren't prepared, if you just happened to drive through that place and had no idea that it was like that, you might walk right through it and never notice it. You see, so part of it is in preparation of a person's mind to connect with such things. But it's not all just that. But it can, but that's an important part. So yes, a bunch of people could get together and declare the land there that they have, the Holy Land, and they could put that story out. They could get a lot of other people to agree with them, and eventually it would be a real thing. Because when other people would come there, they'd have expectations, they'd calm their minds, they'd walk, they'd listen, they'd feel, and sure enough, they could feel that collective consciousness. They could feel that having been developed there. So yeah, they can be made. Now, are the made ones as strong as the ones that were Indra's jewels? I don't know, whether that's it or not. But there's literally hundreds of thousands of people that are aware of these particular sites and the reputations that they have, and that's enough to build a pretty convincing collective consciousness, whether there was initially anything there or not. But I was in Poland not that long ago, a couple of years ago, and I was taken to a site that was supposed to be one of these special sites where one of Indra's jewels landed, and it had evidently been a kind of a sacred site for a long time. Thousands of years ago, there were relics there that said this was kind of a church kind of place. you might find this. And then another kind of church was built on top of that, and another one built on top of that. And as the ages went by, there's been all sorts of sacred things built on top of this one site. And I walked over. You couldn't get into that site. That was all closed off. The people that owned it now, we're not letting others just walk through it. But we were kind of up above it. It was on the side of a hill. We were up near it, and you could feel it. I could feel it. It was a pull. It's almost like if you were standing up, you could just feel yourself leaning in that direction, like you were being pulled toward that site. So I connected with my mind, and I saw there was a lot of psychic energy around there. So yes, there are sites like that, and they are real. Now, what you get out of them basically depends on what you bring to them. If you bring to just you're a tourist and you say, oh yeah, I feel something, that's great, and then you stay there for a while and leave, it's not going to affect you very much. It'll be a kind of a gee whiz kind of thing for a while, and then you'll forget about it, and it'll have no lasting effect. But if you live there, and live there maybe on that spot, I think it would make meditation very easy, because all you'd have to do is drop into a state where you were open, and bingo, there you'd be connected. So it would be a state where meditation and maybe out of body or some of the other things you do would be easier, simpler. And some of that would be the collective consciousness, and some of that would be, well, we might even say the collected consciousness over the last, 3 or 4 millennia. It may be a very old site, and that collective consciousness may be not just what's been put there in the last 100 years, but maybe in the last 5,000-10,000 years. Because that, when you connect to that, now I guess I'll mention another thing. You can go to a historical site. Let's say a site where the Romans did something. Maybe they built their aqueduct. That's all over Europe, where you can go to a site and here's the Roman aqueduct. And when you get to those sites, you can drop into a meditation state and actually see what's going on there. See the Romans building it. See the Roman slaves helping them build it. You can experience the sounds, the sights, the smells. But it's not because the site contains that information. It's because your mind, from being there, your mind just naturally does things like, gee, I wonder what it would be like, back 2 millennia ago. What was it like here when this thing was being built? Well, that's like a query to the database. As soon as your mind has that question in it, there you are. And you can see everything and smell it and hear it. And it's like, yeah, I see what's going on there. And you do. So that's normal. We have this psychometry where somebody gives you a watch and you say, oh, yes, this watch belonged to a little old lady who got it from her grandfather who got ran over, by a horse and something like that. And you can tell some of the history of it. You're not getting that data from the watch. You're getting that data out of the database because your mind says, oh, I'd like to see or like to hear or whatever, where this, the history of this watch. Well, all you have to do is think that thought and you're getting the data from the database. So the watch doesn't hold the information. The sacred spot doesn't really hold the information. All of that's part of the information in the consciousness system. It's part of the collective consciousness that's been there. So it's associated with that place. So when you walk up to that place and say, well, let me feel what's there, and whoosh, suddenly you find yourself out of body, flying off into some kind of star system someplace. Well, that's when you open your mind to that energy source and that information, that's what you'll get. So it may not actually be the rocks and the dirt and the bricks that are there that are the active element. It's the idea. It's the numbers of people who have been in that place and did things with their minds in that place. That's where the information is stored. After all, the rocks and the dirt there are just virtual rocks and virtual dirt. They're just pictures. It's not really stuff there. This is just information that we get.
Well, Tom,
Okay.
we're going to move on to the next question, and that's Marla.
Wow, you just touched on something, Tom, that I think is really profound. What I think is happening is the dynamic, what you just said, is what your first 15 minutes of in Huntsville was about. And I'm so grateful because I had this intention around talking to you about getting a very concise information around the information system. And the first 15 minutes of the live stream is what I got from you when you were talking with that young guy. It was so concise. And you were talking tomorrow with the Applied Precognition program, and I'm talking on Saturday. So I'm not sure exactly what you're going to discuss, although it says from the path of wellness from fear to love. But what my talk is the next day is about the information through the work that I do. And it's very interesting that you were talking about how the input and the memory and sensing it through our five senses, which I was wondering if it was five, if it was six and seven as well. But for the group on Saturday, all of these remote viewers, I am going to say the sixth and seventh senses as well. But we are processing that information. And what I found interesting is in my talk, I'm talking about this is based on what you were just discussing with Carolyn and my grandmother's ring, which I knew nothing about necessarily her life. I did give it to somebody in a class, and I have done psychometry work with people, and she actually went to the information that my grandmother had lived. I mean, my grandmother wore that ring. So she went to the information in the database of where that ring had possibly been, or you're basically saying it is the database, but she didn't know what she was accessing. So I always thought about, the psychometry of the objects, or walking, of course, onto you can take me into a cemetery, but you can't take me into a battlefield. But the dynamic of that is so profound. So that concise chunk of information is going to be the caveat that I share, because I always talk about you wherever I am on a podcast or as a presentation tomorrow, because I am seeing my work through the lens of an information system. So I'm working myself through that as I'm educating myself through your work. But my question today is about when you're talking about the bits, organizing the bits. So ordering those bits creates information. Is it our intent that structures those bits or orders those bits with the LCS?
No, it's the LCS's initially before we are there. It's the the larger conscious systems intent that structures those bits. But now, once we have individuated unit consciousness, like you and I and everybody else here, then yes, it's we who can organize those bits or disorganize those bits. We can create order and we can create disorder. And when we do that, we change things. As we create order, things are better. Things are healing. Things are moving in a profitable direction. And when we create, or when we create dissonance, or we create high entropy, it's just the same. We're destroying things. We're messing things up. We're making things worse instead of better. So yeah, we organize and then disorganize or deorganize things with our intent. Indeed.
Well, I'm looking at the idea of how powerful our intent is when we are asking the LCS to deliver or access the information for us, because I'm wondering how you can talk about love within the aspect of us going through our five senses to understand what love is as this avatar and this consciousness. But I'm wondering how much of our intent can create all of that.
Yeah, our intent is creative. We do create things, and you don't really ask the larger kind of system to get the data for you. He doesn't work at the database company and, you know, get data. He doesn't fetch data for people, but you just query the system. You know, you ask for the data, and the data comes to you because you have an intent for it and because you're capable of getting it, knowing when it's there, you know, accepting it, hearing it, seeing it. You can collect it. Everybody can query, but some people are not able to actually then get the information. So they can ask the question, but they miss it because they can't quiet their mind enough to actually sort that information out from all the gibberish going on in their mind. But you're practiced, so you can do that easily. So you send out an intent for information, and it doesn't have to be a formal, like, okay, now I'm going to send out an intent. You know, here's my intent, and there it goes. All you need is just a fleeting wisp of a thought to run through your mind, and bingo, data comes back, fulfilling the question that was in that thought. It happens just automatically. So that's how we get the data. Now, what we do with it and how we use it will determine, and the reason why we ask for it will determine whether the result of our getting it is something that's profitable and lowers entropy, or something that is not profitable and raises entropy. So that's up to us. Once we get the data is kind of just data. It's information, but it's what we do with it, what we make of it. Do we take that data and help someone heal with it? Do we take that data and solve problems with it, make people feel better? You know, do we create more love with it? Or do we take that data and use it for, you know, not so good purposes? So what we do with it is whether we organize things further or whether we disorganize things, whether we create more entropy or reduce entropy. And if you constantly get that data and create entropy with it, then the system tends to make it harder for you to get data. Kind of takes your library card and you know, makes it so you're not very successful at getting data, or you get bogus data.
So that comes from basically not using the system with the intent of lowering entropy. Is that what you're saying?
Not using the system.
Using the system with the intent of not lowering entropy, keeping chaos.
Yeah. Yes, if you use the system to create chaos, you can get away with that for a while, but eventually what happens is the chaos you create becomes your own chaos, and it's self-destructive is what it is. You can get by with it for a while, but eventually you will destroy yourself with that process.
Well, I'm interested in the love, so that's where I want to go with this, and how we feel and lower the entropy in order for us to continue and explore love.
Yeah, that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Good. Well, thank you.
It looks like Michael, you are the next one here with a question. You got something ready to roll?
I do. It's not my words. I'm asking this question for somebody else that couldn't make it today. But I'm curious about the question too, because I can relate to it. So as I move through my days in a meditative state, I find that I'm able to turn off the logical process part of my mind and exist only on the being level for some short span of time. It feels amazing, kind of like being in an OBE, even though I am fully aware and awake. Sometimes when I'm in this state, I find that someone will bother me, and the level of irritation that I feel is far higher than it would be if I was in just a calm, normal state. When this happens or starts to happen, I will change the frame of reference of my awareness to one where I am fully connected to the thing that is bothering me, so that I am both the person bothering and the person being bothered. This seems to work to some degree, but I wonder if this is the best strategy to deal with the experiences of people breaking my bubble of serenity. I was wondering if you had any suggestions or comments.
Yeah, there's a problem with your bubble of serenity if when somebody breaks it or intrudes upon it, you get angry. You know, it causes a negative reaction on your part. It's more upsetting. It's more disturbing. That sounds like there's, you know, that you, one, are able to create this bubble. So you have some development that's very good. But on the same time, at the same time, the fact that if somebody intrudes upon your bubble, you get upset, you get irritated. That says that you've got a lot of ego tied up to yourself and to your ability to make this bubble for yourself. You're feeling pretty grand about being able to do that. So when somebody breaks it, then, you know, how could you do that to me? How could you intrude on my private space? Well, all of that is self-centeredness. That's, what about me? You are affecting me. How dare you affect me like that? I would say that the thing to practice would be to not be bothered by people who break into your bubble. Realize that they probably don't know you have that bubble or that you're in that bubble. They just are doing whatever they do, probably because they're probably self-centered too, because that's the way people are mostly in our culture. But you need to have some compassion for them in that they probably didn't intend to intrude, or if they did, they were just getting your attention and didn't know that they were intruding. So be a little kinder to those people and interact with them. Tell them what they need to know. Maybe they're asking you, you know, what time it is or something. Interact with them, help them with whatever it is they're doing, and then go back into your bubble. And you'll find that getting in and out of your bubble becomes easier and easier and easier to where you can step out of it in an instant, step back in it in an instant. And you can be helpful to somebody between those two instants. You can jump out of it and do something, you know, help a little old lady across the street or pick up a lost dog or something. And then you can, once you've dealt with that, you can pop right back into it. Matter of fact, eventually, that's how you'll live your whole life. You'll live your life in that intuitive space of peace and tranquility and caring. And you will still care about all the people around you who are constantly breaking into that, you know, breaking your bubble, and it'll be just fine. You welcome them into your bubble, help them out and usher them back to wherever they're going, and you're back in your bubble again. So that's just your life. So I'd say you obviously are making progress, or you couldn't even create the bubble. That's good. You are making progress. That's a good thing. But you still have some work to do, in the sense that don't get so much ego wrapped around yourself and the fact that you have that bubble, and be perfectly willing to let others crash it when they have a need to. Deal with them in a positive way and go back to it. And you'll find that it's so easy to go back to it that there's really no point in being irritated by it breaking. you can get back in it in a tenth of a second just by wanting to be there. So as you get better and better, things will get easier and easier, and you need to not have your ego with you there in that bubble. Let that stay behind or go away, so that you don't have that reaction, that you're annoyed that they burst into your bubble. Let you step out of your bubble, step back into it easily. Does that answer the question, Michael?
I think so. I guess just wanted to, like, from my perspective, it's different from before. Like he was talking about, like a calm, normal state, let's say, before you're able to create this bubble or this high energy state, you'd be kind of, or I would be kind of disconnected from things. So if somebody was having, a rough time or whatever was doing something to me, I wouldn't be that connected to it to begin with. So it didn't have much effect upon me. But now that, let's say I've got a bubble or a higher energy state, or I'm like connecting to things more, and I'm connecting to this person that's, for example, having a rough time with something or attacking me in some way, it feels like the energy exchange feels sharper or harsher than before. So that can be, like, I guess, tougher at times to deal with. And yeah, it seems like more, I don't know, extreme. And so that's like, can be like maybe a thought of as maybe a bad sign, but it's really not. And yeah, so I think your explanation of it made sense.
I think it feels more extreme and kind of sharper because you're more aware of it. All of those same energetics are going on anyway, and you're not, most people are not aware of it. They're not aware of the other person's feelings who's having a problem with you or needs to get through your bubble and talk to you or something. All that stuff's there, but you're not aware of it. They're not aware of it. Life goes like that. Life is full of little annoying moments. They come and they go, and you don't think too much about them, or sometimes you get angry, but you don't even think too much about that because getting angry is a part of life. But then when you evolve some past that point, then your awareness of it starts to get a lot sharper. And when you feel that somebody is having a problem with you or needs your attention now or wants you to do something that you don't really want to do, it feels a lot sharper. It feels more intense because you're grown up enough to be aware of those feelings. And the feelings, instead of just being mild, are a lot stronger. But then you're more aware, you can deal with those stronger feelings better. So it's just part of the growing up process. You become more aware, but you become more able to handle the things you're more aware of. And so it goes step by step as you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. So you'll see all of it, as you continue to evolve, all of it will get easier and work better, work smoother. Eventually you'll find out that life is not only very nice and very good, but it's very smooth. You don't have these jerks and bumps and things to deal with that's kind of crashing on you. Nothing really tends to crash in on you anymore. Everything is, and everybody is kind of okay the way they are, and you can deal with all of it positively. But there's lots of little bumps along the way. You don't just get that way. Don't wake up that way one day. It's a long process getting there. And in that process, there's lots of little bumps and things like you sometimes feel like you're going backwards and then going forwards again. That's okay. That's the way it is. So in this person that you're asking this question for, sounds like they're developing nicely. That's good that they can spend this time in that kind of a space while they're out in the world. That's takes a little work to get there, and that's good. But they also have to realize that they're sharing that space with other people, and those other people may not be as evolved as they are, but you still need to treat them with care. And practice getting back into the bubble very easily so that being knocked out of it isn't really annoying anymore.
Thank you very much.